In the early hours of October 2, 2018, a rising young hairstylist was gunned down by her own husband hours after she went live on Facebook exposing his abuse. In that live stream, she described the violence she had been enduring, and in a chilling moment even said she might not survive. She had no idea her words would become reality that same night. Around 8 p.m., she made a frantic call to 911, her voice shaking as she said a gun was pointed at her head. Moments later, gunshots rang out. But what investigators uncovered afterward revealed an even darker truth than anyone first imagined. This is the tragic story of Lashandanda Landa Childs. Landa Sharice Childs was born on October 5, 2000, in Dayton, Ohio, to Nina and Joseph Childs. She grew up with 3 siblings and quickly became known for her independence, confidence, and determination. From a young age, she wanted to do things on her own, a trait that followed her into her teenage years. As she got older, Landa found her passion in beauty and self-expression. Makeup, hair, and fashion weren't just pastimes. They were part of who she was. Her family remembered walking into rooms where her beauty tools were spread across the table, as she practiced for hours on herself and her friends. She dreamed of turning that passion into a career, and by 17, she had already started her own business, the Beauty Blender LLC. She offered eyebrow waxing, hairstyling, nails, and professional makeup services, while also selling her own beauty products. For someone so young, it was an incredible accomplishment that showed how ambitious she was. But it wasn't only her talent that stood out. Landa had a bright, magnetic personality. Friends and family described her as outspoken, fun, and full of life. Her social media reflected the same energy: confident, bold, and unforgettable. Landa loved sharing her world online. Her followers often saw her dancing, showing off makeup trends, and giving fashion tips. She promoted her business while letting people enjoy her playful, everyday side. With her charm and drive, it felt like nothing could hold her back. But behind the posts and the laughter was a painful reality. Landa was trapped in a relationship most people around her didn't fully understand. The man she was with was more than a decade older, and soon he became her abuser. In her own words, "This man is 11 years older than me. I'm 17, he's 28. Back in September 2017, when she was only 17, Landa started dating 28-year-old Trendell Lamont Goodwin after meeting him on social media. From the start, he lied about his age, telling her he was 20. Their chats grew frequent and personal, filled with talk about family, dreams, and the future. Trendell came across as supportive and charming, showering her with compliments and paying close attention to her work. For Landa, it felt like she had someone who believed in her. By September, they were officially together. On the surface, it looked like a promising relationship. But in reality, it was anything but safe. The truth about Trendell soon surfaced. Police records showed he had been arrested at least 15 times since 2011 for violence against women, including his own mother, sister, and former girlfriends. Most of those cases never made it to court. And once Landa learned the truth about his age, things took a darker turn. The abuse escalated. He became controlling, calling her constantly, sometimes up to 70 times in a single day. He took her phone, monitored her, and even harassed her family. Being young and inexperienced, Landa confused his control with love. She didn't realize how dangerous the situation was becoming. On Christmas Eve 2017, the violence escalated in front of her own family. Trendell accused her of texting another man, threw a drink at her, and tried to drag her out of a car by her feet. Just 2 months earlier, in another jealous outburst, he had smashed her phone against a wall and tossed her purse into a sewer. These were only some of the incidents, but each one grew worse than the last. On January 31, 2018, things took an even darker turn. After Landa told him she planned to go out with a friend, he allegedly slapped her across the face. The fight spiraled. He threatened to knock her out, forced her out of his home without clothes, and left her begging neighbors for help. When she returned later to gather her belongings, the situation exploded again. Trendell dragged her back inside and refused to let her leave. By the time police arrived, they could hear her screams through the door. Officers forced their way in and arrested him on the spot. But that arrest didn't stop the cycle. Weeks later, on February 19, 2018, he attacked her again. During an argument about text messages from another woman, Trendell hit her, bit her shoulder, and left her bruised. Landa immediately called the police. When officers arrived, they noted her injuries: fresh bite marks on her shoulder, swelling on her face, abrasions on her neck. Even Trendell had a bloody nose. Once again, he was taken into custody. Even with his violence escalating, the justice system failed Landa. Trendell was sentenced to 180 days for misdemeanor assault, but he served only 19. The court ordered him to stay away from her and attend counseling. It wasn't nearly enough. What happened next stunned everyone. While he was still behind bars, Landa wrote a letter to the judge pleading for his release. She described him as kind-hearted and family-oriented, saying he was a good man and that they were only going through a rough patch. Her words worked. Trendell walked free after less than 3 weeks. The system knew he was dangerous, but he was back in her life almost immediately, and the abuse reached new levels. In September 2018, he allegedly yanked her hair, ripped off her wig, and set it on fire before throwing it at her. The flames burned her, and in shock, she dropped her phone. He grabbed it and ran. By September 21st, Landa reached her breaking point. She posted a long message on Facebook, exposing the years of abuse she had suffered. The post spread quickly, gaining attention far beyond her circle of friends. But even then, the violence didn't stop. Landa revealed that Trendell had shown up at her family's home and opened fire, spraying bullets into the house. Her family reported it, and authorities extended his probation and issued a restraining order, requiring him to stay at least 500 feet away. Her viral post brought support from friends, many of whom began warning her to stay careful. But the most chilling response came from Trendell himself. Instead of denying the accusations, he taunted her directly under the same post, almost like a public death threat. But Trendell didn't stop at Landa. He started targeting anyone who defended her online. If someone commented telling him to leave her alone, he went after them too. The most disturbing moment came on September 22nd. A woman who commented on Landa's post, urging him to get help, went to the police after he threatened to kill her. His rage wasn't limited to Landa anymore. He was now coming for anyone who dared speak against him. Despite the warnings, despite the reports, Landa was still living under constant threat. And 2 weeks after her Facebook post, her greatest fear became reality. On the night of October 2nd, 2018, around 8 p.m., Landa placed a desperate 911 call. She and her new boyfriend were sitting in a parked car on Shoup Avenue in Dayton. She believed she was meeting Trendell to settle things, to finally convince him to leave her alone. But it was a trap. Her family would later reveal that he had lured her there under the pretense of talking things out. In truth, he was enraged about her viral post. She had exposed him to the world, and he wasn't going to let her go. Then, in an instant, her nightmare became real. Trendell appeared with a gun. Landa, panicked, dialed 911. With her voice trembling, she told the dispatcher that Trendell had a weapon pointed at her boyfriend's head, and she reminded them that she had a restraining order against him. She begged for help. But what happened next, and what authorities did in response, would later draw heavy criticism. Police later obtained the 911 call Landa made that night. Because she was still a minor, the audio was never released publicly. But her words were recorded. "This dude's got a gun pointed at my boyfriend. I've got a restraining order on him. The police told me to call when I see him." Moments later, she added, "I can't talk. I'm in a bad situation. Send somebody. I've got a protection order against this dude and he's got a gun." Instead of logging the call as an active armed threat, dispatch marked it as a protection order violation. That single decision slowed the urgency of the response. While officers were still on their way, the situation turned deadly. Landa and her boyfriend tried to escape, pulling away in their car. That's when Trendell opened fire. Multiple shots tore through the vehicle. One struck Landa in the head. Her boyfriend rushed her to Grandview Medical Center in a desperate attempt to save her life. When officers finally reached the Shoup Avenue location she had given, they learned she was already at the hospital. There, investigators spoke to her boyfriend, who recounted everything. He told them how Trendell walked up with a gun, aimed it at him, and how Landa dialed 911 before they tried to drive off. That was when Trendell fired. Neighbors on Shoup Avenue later described hearing gunfire and a woman's screams cutting through the night. The area was quickly taped off as police investigated both the shooting and the protective order violation. But the tragedy was already sealed. Despite doctors' efforts, on the morning of October 3rd, just before 9 a.m., 17-year-old Lashandanda Landa Childs was pronounced dead, only 2 days before what should have been her 18th birthday. Those closest to Landa are still mourning a life cut short. She should have been celebrating her 18th birthday. Instead, her family and friends gathered to grieve. Some carried her name permanently with them, tattoos that read R.I.P. Landa. The painful truth was clear. She had done everything the system told her to do. She left her abuser. She filed reports. She obtained a restraining order. But none of it was enough to protect her. After the shooting, Trendell fled the scene. He didn't get far. Within hours, Dayton police tracked him down and arrested him. He was charged with murder, felonious assault, and violating a protective order. For Landa's family, the arrest brought only a brief sense of relief. The man who had stalked, harassed, and terrorized her was finally behind bars. But the questions that haunted them were overwhelming. Why wasn't he stopped after the first probation violation? How many warnings were ignored? Why wasn't she protected when she needed it most? 3 days later, on October 5, 2018, Trendell appeared in Montgomery County Court for his first hearing. His long criminal history surfaced, over a dozen arrests, most tied to violence against women, including his own family members. Despite this record, he had still been free. He pleaded not guilty. The judge, recognizing the gravity of the charges, set bail at $1 million, ensuring he would remain in custody. That date carried cruel symbolism. October 5th was supposed to be Landa's 18th birthday. Instead of a celebration, her family sat in a courtroom, staring at the man accused of stealing her future. Her mother, Nina, later said her daughter believed she could negotiate her way out of danger. That meeting on Shoup Avenue was supposed to be her chance to end the harassment once and for all. But instead, Trendell carried out the threats he had made for months. Her family was heartbroken and furious. Landa's story wasn't only about a young life stolen. It was about how the system failed her over and over, even after she went public with her abuse and begged for protection. Her murder sparked outrage across Dayton and beyond. Domestic violence advocates pointed to the repeated red flags in Trendell's past. Police records documented years of abuse, not just against Landa, but also against his own family members and other women. Local media highlighted how Landa turned to Facebook as her last lifeline. Her posts, detailing the stalking, the beatings, and even her hair being set on fire, were seen by hundreds. Friends left chilling warnings in the comments, urging her to leave town before it was too late. Days later, their fears came true. Instead of planning her 18th birthday, her family was arranging her funeral. The timing was unbearable. She had been preparing to graduate, grow her beauty business, and pursue her dream of becoming a cosmetologist. Now, those plans ended in silence. Her family demanded accountability, not only for Trendell, but also for the system that had failed to enforce the protections meant to keep her alive. Then came a shocking twist. Trendell's trial was scheduled for October 2019, but instead of going before a jury, he stunned the courtroom by accepting a plea deal. He pled guilty to all charges, including murder, felonious assault, and firing into an occupied vehicle. The deal guaranteed a sentence of 18 years to life. The firearm charge alone added mandatory years to his time. For Landa's family, the plea was bittersweet. On one hand, they were relieved they wouldn't have to endure a long trial and relive every detail. On the other, they believed he deserved life without parole, to ensure he could never harm another woman again. Still, the judge handed down the sentence. At least 18 years behind bars with no fixed release date. His number was life. For her family, that meant some sense of closure. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. After signing the plea deal, Trendell tried to back out. He wrote to the judge, claiming his lawyer had misled him about how long he'd actually spend in prison. He even requested to fire his attorney and push for a lighter sentence. The judge allowed him to dismiss his lawyer and consult with a new one. But once Trendell learned that going to trial could mean 40 years to life, he quickly changed his mind. He stuck with the plea agreement, sealing his fate. In November 2019, the courtroom filled once again. Landa's family sat quietly, weighed down by grief but clinging to hope that justice would finally be served. Trendell Goodwin stood before the judge and was officially sentenced to 18 years to life in prison. He won't be eligible for parole until 2038. For Landa's mother, it was bittersweet. The sentence ensured he couldn't hurt anyone else for a long time, but it didn't bring her daughter back. She would never see her graduate, get married, or open the salon she dreamed of. Advocates across Ohio called the case a brutal reminder of how the system continues to fail victims of domestic violence. They argued that Trendell's long history of abuse should have kept him off the streets years earlier. Landa's family has since made it their mission to keep her memory alive. On what would have been her 19th birthday, loved ones gathered for a candlelight vigil. They released balloons into the night sky and shared stories about the vibrant young woman whose ambition had inspired so many. Her business, the Beauty Blender LLC, became a lasting symbol of her drive and determination. LaShonda Landa Childs was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a dreamer. Her life was stolen before she could step into adulthood. But her story continues to raise awareness, reminding us how urgent it is to protect those trapped in cycles of abuse before it's too late. What do you think about Landa's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this story important, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories like this.